Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show. I'm Richard Harris, your host. Super glad that you could be joining us today. On today's program, we're going to be talking about why I have great hope for America. You know, many people, they look at what's going on in our country today, and it seems like God's judgment must be imminent. Sodom and Gomorrah type conditions exist. You know, in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, it talks about how in Genesis 19, the men of that town surrounded Lot's house, demanding that angels be released to them so they could have their way with them sexually in the street. Incredible. And today in America, sexual immorality is rampant. We have drag queen performances to children. I've heard people say things like, if God doesn't judge America, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, and then we have in Genesis chapter 6, the flood that took place, you know, in the times of Noah. And it says in Genesis 6, 11 through 13, the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. God looked upon the earth, and behold it, and it was corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the flood. So today there is corruption everywhere. It's rampant throughout our society, and there is violence everywhere. It's amazing, these murders and attacks that are taking place in our country today, and how people are killing one another over nothing, and the hatred and the vitriol. So I can understand where people are coming from when they say God's going to judge America, God's going to judge America. But we have to remember something, brothers and sisters, and it's this. Jesus Christ came to save us, not to judge us. John chapter 1, verse 17, for the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. John 3:17 says, God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. In Luke chapter 19, verse 10, Jesus said, the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. In John 5:22, Jesus himself said, the Father judges no man, but hath committed all judgment unto the Son. And then what did Jesus say about himself? He said, you judge after the flesh, I judge no man. That was John 8:15. So if God the Father's not judging and God the Son is not judging, then what ground do we have to say that God is going to judge the earth, judge America? You see, I believe that God is actually redeeming America. He is raising up in this nation a remnant that is going to see his glory manifested in ways that we can only dream of, that we've only dreamed of. You know, sometimes it can seem like we're all alone, can it? In this fight that we're engaged in for the culture, for America, for repentance, for revival. Sometimes it feels like we're so greatly outnumbered and that there's no hope for victory. Do you know Elijah felt this way? In 1 Kings chapter 19, he had just slain the prophets of Baal and confronted Jezebel, and then he fled for his life to the north. And he says to God in 1 Kings chapter 19, he says, I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And I, even I, only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. See, from the greatest mountaintop, we can go into the deepest valley sometimes, but I want you to look at what the Lord said back to Elijah in verse 18 of 1 Kings 19. He said, yet I have left me 7,000 in Israel, the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which has not kissed him. God had reserved for himself in Israel 7,000 people that had not worshipped Baal, our holy remnant. You know, the Jews were sent into captivity to Babylon in the latter part of the kingdom of Israel and Judah. They were sent to Babylon because of their sin and everything. But God preserved for Himself, even in the Jews that were taken captive, a remnant that would be returned to the land to restore the land and restore the nation of Israel to its God-given purpose and identity. We see this in Isaiah when he's prophesying about the destruction and captivity of Judah by the Babylonians that was coming. But he says in Isaiah 10:21, the remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, unto the mighty God. Jeremiah saw the same thing in Jeremiah 23:3 when he said, I will gather the remnant of my flock out of the countries whither I have driven them, and will bring them again to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase. In the same way, I am convinced that God is not done with this nation and that great things are happening. We produced here at Truth and Liberty a film called Hope for the Future. It's about a 48-minute long documentary style production that I think is just awesome. But it tells the story of 3 prophetic words that the Lord has given to Andrew Wommack, beginning with March the 5th of 2021, when Andrew said the Lord just spoke to him and told him that the third great awakening had already begun. And a couple years later in 2023, the Lord spoke again through Andrew. And Andrew prophesied that all of this woke stuff that we see happening around us is in 3 years' time, by the 250th anniversary of the United States, would all be coming down, even to the point that the liberal media would notice it. Look what we're seeing around us today, folks, as this woke stronghold that was strangling our nation is crumbling before our very eyes. And I encourage all of you to pick up a copy of that movie today. It's still available on through Truth and Liberty and Andrew Wommack Ministries here. It will bless you. It will be an encouragement to you. But Andrew, the third prophetic word was that same year in 2023 at the Truth and Liberty Conference. He said, basically, church, the Lord said, I know you're discouraged, but don't be discouraged, be encouraged. There's going to be a lot of battles. You're going to win some and you're going to lose some, but in the end, we win. And then he said something so amazing. He said, the people that are in positions of power today and influence in 2 years' time are not going to be here. And what did we see happen in 2 years' time? We saw the incredible election in November 2024 when Donald Trump was ushered into the White House for the second time against all odds, even surviving an assassin's bullet by a hair's breadth. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about this today. Church attendance in America is skyrocketing. It is going through the roof. People are returning to God. You can see here on this chart that millennials in America now are attending church weekly almost 40% of the time, down from roughly 16-17% just a few years ago. This is as of 2022. In 2025, it's even higher. Gen X is also rising rapidly. And the chart doesn't even show Gen Z, but the data is out there that over a majority of Gen Z men are now back in church on a regular basis. They are coming to Christ. Did you know that in 2024, Bible sales went through the roof? Bible sales. All book sales in America increased in 2024 and on average about 1%. But did you know that in the first 10 months of 2024 that Bible sales in America went up 24%? If that's not a sign of revival, I don't really know what is. You guys remember the revival that broke out at Asbury College in 2023, I believe it was. 2023, when at that little college in Kentucky, 50,000 people from all over the world came just to get a touch from God, as some college students there decided they didn't want to give up on praise and worship. And they stayed overnight, all night long, and began to seek the face of God. And more people began to come to experience God, and more and more and more. And before long, the whole auditorium was packed and people from all over the world surrounded the town. They couldn't even get them in. That revival now has spread to multiple college campuses throughout America. University of Georgia, Auburn, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Purdue, and on as we see thousands and thousands of college students across America coming to Christ. The winners of the National Football Championship, College Football Championship last year, Ohio State University. Here you see that revival swept through their locker room as many of the Ohio State players gave their lives to Christ. There were pictures online of them getting baptized in horse feeding troughs and other things like that. Here you see them wearing Jesus Won t-shirts, a small movement that broke out across collegiate athletics and even professional sports, this Jesus Won idea. This last May, we saw a record number of people baptized in America, the highest number ever in a single day in the Pacific Ocean. I believe the number was upwards close to 20,000 people baptized in a single day. And this has been going on now for several years. Let's look back at the 2024 election in more detail. While young voters in America, still 18 to 24, still tended toward the Democratic candidate, their support, the margin by which they did so narrowed considerably. Young voters supported Kamala Harris over Donald Trump only by 4 percentage points in 2024. That went from well, let me go back to 2020, where they supported Joe Biden over Donald Trump by 25 percentage points. So that margin went down from 25 to 4%. And this shift that is happening was driven mostly by young men, many of whom voted for Biden in 20, but shifted to their support Trump in 2024. The statistics show that 56% of young men voted for Donald Trump, compared to 41% in 2020. Young women, women voters, while still favoring Harris slightly, also showed a modest shift toward Donald Trump, going from 33% in 2020 to 40% in 2024. And so it also, the shift also happened across racial and ethnic lines, as black young voters' support for the Democrat candidate dropped from 87% in 2020 to only 75% in 2024. While that still seems like a long way to go, it is, but wow, what amazing progress. Asian American youth switched from 83% vote for the Democrat to 72%. You can see on this chart, white men, an 11% gain, white women 6%, black men a 20% gain toward the conservative candidate, black women 6%, Latino men 13%, and on it goes. So today, we have an incredible thing that's taking place. We are privileged today to watch the unfolding before us of the Third Great Awakening. I think this thing is going to continue. I don't think it's anywhere close to being done. The other thing I wanted to point out is how wokeism is being canceled in major corporations and minor ones all across America, from Boeing to Walmart, from McDonald's to Tractor Supply. They're shedding this whole woke DEI mantra and ideology that has led to so much destruction. Companies like General Motors and more. And so guys, I think we're in an incredible time. And the time that we're in is not a time to sit back. We cannot sit back in our comfy chairs anymore and say, well, look at what we did. Look what God did. Isn't that nice? Everything's going to be okay now. No, everything's not going to be okay if you take that attitude. We need to have a pit bull mindset here, a conquering general mindset. Do you know the greatest general in American history, some would say, is Stonewall Jackson? Certainly the greatest general of the Civil War, although his life was cut short. Jackson was incredible, and he basically said that the secret to victory is you identify a weak spot in the enemy's line and you hit that weak spot. And once you break through that line, you do not stop. You do not relent. You pursue the enemy until they are 100% completely vanquished and run off the battlefield entirely. This is the mindset the Church of Jesus Christ has to have in this hour and in this day. We cannot allow the seeds of this spirit of Antichrist to ever take root in our nation again. And it's not even uprooted yet. We've still got a lot of work to get it uprooted. We're making progress and God is on the move and great things are happening, but we must be relentless in our pursuit of this wickedness that has come into our country. And we have to restore America to its Christian foundations and win this nation back to the Lord Jesus Christ. People are hungry for the truth. They want this, even if they don't know it. They want answers. They want life. They want joy. They want peace. They want truth. They want stability. They want to be able to have families and plan for the future and live in a country that's free and prosperous. We can do this, guys. We can do this with God's help. But we can't sit back and stay quiet. We can't sit back and not get involved anymore. And I have a really special and unusual guest today to talk about this revival. His name is Braeden Sorbo. At just 23 years old, Braeden has emerged as a dynamic and influential voice in today's cultural landscape. As an actor, author, speaker, he is making waves as a cultural commentator, amassing 2 million followers online. Known for his bold perspective and unfiltered approach, Braeden is not just talking about change, he's leading it. And so we're going to take a short break, share some information with you today. And when we come back, I'm going to have Braeden Sorbo joining me. By the way, he's the son of Kevin Sorbo, an accomplished Christian actor, and Kevin's wife, who also was our guest on a recent show, an episode of Truth and Liberty, Sam Sorbo. So please don't go away. We're going to share some information. We'll be right back after that as I sit down with young Braeden Sorbo. I think you'll find this interview fascinating and entertaining. Are you passionate about standing for truth in the culture, but don't know how to get started? Well, Truth and Liberty, our mission is to educate, unify, and mobilize the body of Christ to stand for truth in the public square. And as part of our mission, we provide you with an amazing array of resources on our website. And our website has just been revamped, remodeled, and retooled to be user-friendly. And I'm so excited about it because I believe that there's nothing like it out there anywhere. I want to encourage you today to go to truthandliberty.net and check out the Resources Center and the Get Equipped Center. On our Resources Center, you will find hundreds of links, hundreds of videos, articles, blogs, even America's original founding documents can be found on Truth and Liberty's Resources Center. It's searchable by topic, preset topic, or you can put in a custom search to find exactly what you need and what you're interested in. In the Get Equipped section, we link you to tools created by our strategic partners, including Pray, Vote, and Engage tools. We culture impact teams, civic action teams, biblical citizenship in modern America, biblical worldview training, and more. So go today to truthandliberty.net and find what you need to get equipped to stand for truth in the public square. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Truth and Liberty Show. As promised, our special guest today on the program is Braeden Sorbo, and we are just so honored and delighted to have you joining us here on Truth and Liberty today. Braeden, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Are you? Braeden, you are an amazing young guy. I don't know how old you are, sir, but you've already been in 11 motion pictures, authored 2 books. You have a podcast with over 2 million followers. Man, what's the secret to your success?
Torture, sadism, masochism, whatever you want to call it, just the desire to be universally liked online and hated at the same time.
Oh, wow. Well, you've achieved it, man. It's time to retire. No, I saw some, I actually read your Wikipedia page and I thought, oh my gosh, this is Adolf Hitler. No, I'm just kidding. But kind of crazy. The hate is for real out there. But let me, your dad is Kevin Sorbo, renowned Christian actor, and your mom is an actress, and you guys are from that sort of industry, the filmmaking business. It's one of the areas where it seems like Christians have really struggled to have influence in the last 70 years, and I'm kind of just curious, as a young man who sort of grew up in that business, is that picture changing for us? Are we beginning to see Christian films and stuff have more success, and what do you attribute that to?
Well, to really answer that, you kind of have to go back to why Hollywood was destroyed in the first place. Because when film was becoming a little bit more mainstream with the Hollywood movement and media as a whole, you had morally uplifting pictures, as they called them, right? Content was made for the edification of humankind. We wanted stuff that was uplifting because we wanted people to go to movies so that they could leave feeling better about themselves, that they hadn't just wasted 2 hours or an hour and a half of their life. And it wasn't until, the 60s that a group of people who pretty much just hated Jesus and God got into power. And what they did was they decided that they could control a media, a culture through the means of media. And what they did was they created content that slowly became more and more left-leaning, more and more liberal in theology, not traditional liberalism, but rather this modern mainline liberalism that we all know and don't love. And really what that's done is it's usurped the ideas that once founded the movie industry. And so, yes, there is a slight revival within the media sphere because the people in media are seeing that people want glorifying content. They want good, feel good movies. But the fact of the matter is, the funders don't care. And so, as long as the people who are creating the content can still get the checks, they'll make whatever the funders want. And the people who hold the money don't love Jesus, don't love God, and don't love Christian morals. And so until those people who are funding the movies run out of money, we're going to see kind of the mainstream media, at least, pushing this liberal elitism kind of faux subjective morality.
Well, and I don't want to spend today's show talking too much about it, but how do we change that?
Well, we change it through supporting content made by good people, supporting content that is good, right? I mean, my family has Sorbo Studios, and we try our best to make uplifting, family-friendly content, and it's hard. Pirates of the Caribbean has a $300 million budget just to film. They have another, $100 million in prints and advertising. Movies like, God's Not Dead, Let There Be Light, Left Behind, the movies that my family is making are $2 million, really, maybe $5 million at most. And so people hear $5 million and they think that's a lot, but it really is just catering on a major motion film. And so what we need to do is we need to be showing our support, even though I understand, even though the content isn't as amazing as the graphics that you'll get and the CGI that you'll find in a Marvel movie, you have to realize that what you're doing is you are supporting something that is inherently much better, not perfect, because nothing ever is, but simply better than the content that the main people are making.
Well, I think that's a great answer, but let me ask you this. Having your family's immersed in that industry and everything like that, how did your folks, and how did you, as obviously you love the Lord and everything, but how did you guys stay intact, stay strong, and stay true to your values and to your faith in God in the midst of that environment?
Well, I would say that it partially comes from my parents because of the fact that they had the exodus, the blacklisting, if you will, sort of began around the time I was born. And so it wasn't until I was really old enough to start making my own decisions that my parents had already been blacklisted. So I wasn't necessarily surrounded by all of these bad actors that a lot of people grow up with, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Now, it's not to say that there weren't, steps that I had to avoid, because growing up in California, that is really, no matter where you turn, you're going to find those kinds of sins, faults, pitfalls, all of those things. But it really comes down to the foundation that my parents gave for me and set in place for me, because the people know that in the book of Proverbs, it says, teach a child the way he shall go, and he will not depart from it for all the days of his life. And there is truth to that. People may meander away or go a different direction for a period of time, but ultimately we have that objective moral truth that Paul writes in Romans 1 that is inscribed on the hearts of man. And so we know inherently what is right and wrong, but our flesh desires to do what is wrong. And so long as your parents can set that good foundation for you, you have a higher chance, not a 100% guarantee, because everyone has free will. God has children, he doesn't have grandchildren. Just because your parents are believers doesn't mean you yourself are saved.
Right.
People need to learn to make that active decision. And that active choice is a lot easier to make when you have a good foundation.
Yeah, well said, brother. Well, and I see this in amongst so many Christians, that when we're deciding where to go with our life, young people even, making decisions about their career paths, or even, Christian parents advising their kids, we want to steer away from things that we consider evil, right? Oh, don't go into movies, that's evil. Don't go into politics, that's evil. What do you mean you want to be rich and famous? That's evil. Is that the right way of thinking, or should we have more of sort of the light is called to the darkness mentality?
Well, It's going to be a little bit of both, right? We know Ephesians 5:11 that says, "Do not take part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them." But at the same time, I like to describe it as practical sainthood, which is actually a thing my buddy has as a course that he teaches. But this idea of practical sainthood is that there is a time and a place for everything. And so, yes, some people may be called to go into the deep, dark depths of Hollywood or politics or the music industry or whatever. But that is not everybody. And we have to realize that there are different places that each person is supposed to be. And those different places are where we play our role the best. I like to say God created everybody with equal inherent value, but a different purpose. And so I cannot draw to save my life. My sister is one of the most talented artists, especially self-taught at 19 years old, that I've ever seen. Right? We have a different purpose in life, but our value remains the same. And so, yes, people can go into Hollywood. Yes, they can go into the music industry. Yes, they can go into politics, but I would also caution them because those dark places tend to get a hold of you. And so unless you are already secure in your faith first, you will struggle.
Yeah, that's true. Very mature. So, all right, brother. Well, I see one. Do I see two books behind you? I definitely see BS Politics. So, can you tell us about that? Is that your book?
Yes. So the BS Guide to Politics was the first book I wrote right after high school. I graduated. I told my mom I wanted to be an actor and that I was going to college for it. And she goes, "Why would you go to school to learn how to say words in front of a camera? That seems like a waste of money." And I said, "You know what? You're right, but I don't know what to do." And so she recommended that I write a book. And I decided that the best way to do it as someone who had always been in politics. I mean, I was never good with numbers. I was not a math or, an algebra, physics, science kid. I was the debater. I loved history. I loved English. I loved writing. Those were my topics. Those were my subjects. And so all throughout high school, I did competitive speech and debate, if people couldn't tell. And I loved writing speeches that would get people riled up. And so when the idea to write a book on politics, but through the lens of the sarcastic class clown popped into my head, I really couldn't say no to it. And so that's what the book is. It's simply a dictionary of political verbiage that people can use, but at least from a sarcastic stance, because the political sphere is very dark. It's very heavy. I mean, we were just talking about that. And I want people to be able to engage, to know what these buzzwords these politicians are using mean, but to also be able to retain a smile, to be able to enjoy it at the same time.
Excellent. Where do people get a copy of it?
Well, people can get a copy of that at sorbostudios.com, and that's the same place they can get my second book, which is sort of visible on the shelf behind me. It's a little harder to see against the blue wall. It's called Embrace Masculinity,
Yeah.
Lifting Men Up in a World That Pushes Them Down. And that book was the one that I wrote last year, published this past year, 2 months ago. And it is essentially a godly guide for masculinity in the West today. It is a revival and a returning to an objective moral truth that our country so desperately needs.
How do you define biblical or godly masculinity?
Well, biblical and godly masculinity is exemplified throughout multiple characters in the Bible, but obviously no better than through Jesus himself. It is protection, providing for those who care or for those you care about, and responsibility. So protection, provision, responsibility. It's that ultimate sacrifice. And so St. Paul writes in the letter to the Ephesians 5, verses 23 and onward, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, giving himself up for her as a blameless sacrifice." That idea of masculinity is the idea that we should be willing and able to sacrifice ourselves for the betterment, for the progression, for the furtherance of our family. Right? That is our goal as men. It is, as a man, my entire purpose, right? It doesn't matter how much money I have. It doesn't matter what kind of cars I drive. It doesn't matter how big my house is. When I go into the ground, all disappears. It doesn't get to come with me. What matters as a man is longevity, and that is my family. And so did I build a family, and did I do the best job that I could at getting them into heaven, right? And so true masculinity is not overbearance. It is not domineering. It is not manipulative. It is not oppressive. Those are not tenets of true masculinity. And the left has warped masculinity into convincing people that that is what masculinity is and therefore it is bad. True masculinity is this idea of I'm going to protect for you, I'm going to provide for you, and I am going to be responsible for you.
Yeah. And the idea of that true or biblical masculinity is fueled by love. Isn't that at the center of it? Of course, as we know, Christ, there's been no greater man. He is the perfect example of man and manhood, and Jesus came because God so loved the world, and you can see it right there, right in His sacrifice and in everything else that He gave us. How do we get the message out about that, Braeden? How do we spread the word about being masculine is a good thing, and here's what it really is, and fight back against the world's perceptions?
Well, it's sort of pushing itself out into the world right now because there is such a vacuum in the sense of we don't have any good men out there fighting the good fight. At least in my generation, there is sort of a lot of young men, and this is not to say that there are not good young men, right? We could talk about the statistics. The 2024 election, more young men voted right than ever before. My generation polls at farther conservative and right-leaning than any generation in the history of the world. And so it's not that those people don't exist. It's that they don't see a reason in fighting to keep a system that doesn't want them alive. And so what we need to realize is that there are plenty of good young men out in the world who want to do good, who want to have a family, who want to protect their country. I mean, the polls were stating that during the 2024 election, young men, when asked the biggest issues for them, the biggest issues overall were border security, so national security, were the economy, and then sustainability. The idea that you would be able to protect your country's borders, that you would be able to afford life for yourself, and then sustainability, find a partner, settle down and have a family, right? Those are the things that people care about the most, at least the young men. The young women, the biggest issue for them, 67% said abortion. And so what you have right now is you have the largest political divide between the genders that we've ever had. Because traditionally, women have always leaned left with their nurturing self, and men with their, aggressive, wanting to be out there, wanting to push to better humanity, have always tried for the betterment of the whole, more or less. I wouldn't necessarily speak in a complete generalization. But this divide is wider than we've ever seen before. And so a lot of people in my generation realize that. And so they're stepping back, they're bowing out, they're disenfranchised by the establishment right now. And that's why you see, political figures that you never would have thought come up into power rising to the top. It's because my generation is saying, well, if you're just going to platform people that we see as bad actors, as fakes, as inauthentic, then we would rather promote someone who seems authentic but might not even have the ideals that we want. It's better to burn the system down and start from the ground than try to fix it with how many broken pieces are already there. And so when we talk about bringing men into the fight, when we talk about pushing this message of masculinity, true masculinity to the world, we have to realize that the groundwork is already there. They just need the call to action.
Is the message of true biblical masculinity, is it kind of a breath of fresh air to young men?
I certainly would say it is. A lot of young men are looking for that truth. And that's why there's this return to Christianity. I mean, a couple years ago, 18% of Gen Zers said that they attended church regularly in the United Kingdom. Today, that number is almost 40%. And so you have a big, right? You have a big jump in attendance in church in America, right? You have this return to what people call traditional Christianity. So high church Protestantism, Catholicism, Orthodoxy. The Diocese of Los Angeles said that they had a 34% uptick in converts from 2023 to 2024. And from 22 to 23, they had another 30%. They're expecting another 20 to 40% grow in catechumens this year from 2025 to the 6th Easter Vigil, right? So people are returning, and specifically young men, because they're looking for tradition. They're looking for that depth. And what they're doing is they're finding it in old truths, if you will. And so you have this kind of, this almost reignition of a flame, of this passion, which is why so many people are, so Pope Leo is the most beloved world figure in the world right now. Like out of all of the world figures that we have, Elon Musk, Zelensky, Putin, Trump, whoever, Pope Leo's the number one guy. And he's just an American who became the Pope, right? And so a lot of people are saying, well, if he were to call to a crusade, I would take up arms right now. So you have this fire, this desire for people to want to do what their ancestors did, to want to retake the Holy Land, to want to bring truth, to the world. And all they're looking for is that catalyst. And I hope that my book is one of those.
Let me ask you what's a little bit of I think, a difficult question, which is you have to deny reality to say that men and women are the same, right? It's obvious to anybody who's been on the earth for any time at all that there's this difference between two types of humans, male and female, right? How do we acknowledge and give proper space to those differences and yet not discriminate and deprive people of opportunity, honor, whatever the case may be? You see what I'm saying? There seems to be a battle along these lines. Of course, the left wants to obscure all differences, pretend like they don't exist, and force women into men's spaces and men into women's spaces and all this other stuff. And yet at the same time, do women have the right to speak in church, right? I mean, this kind of stuff. How do we balance that? How do you balance it? Let's just put it that way. What's your thoughts about how you balance those two opposing kind of considerations?
Well, we have to realize that what the left has done to women is they've taken away true freedom and they've replaced it with what I call daycare, right? Corporate daycare. They told women that it was not empowering to raise a family, to to take care of a household. I mean, throughout the entire history of humanity, men and women worked side by side. It wasn't discrimination that the man built the house and the woman turned it into a home. It wasn't discrimination that he went out and fought the wars and she took care of the children. Right? That was the order. That was the divinely instituted order. And so to naysayers who go, well, there's no difference between us, there is a difference.
Mm-hmm. Do you
Not
see
in value?
Yeah. I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm curious, kind of circling back to what you were saying earlier. If there's a return of young people, your generation, to traditional forms of Christianity, is there also a return to traditional roles in terms of the genders?
There 100% is. I mean, I know more young women today who say they wish they didn't ever get the right to vote than I've ever talked to in my life, right? They go back and they go, well, if I never had this, then everything throughout the history with abortion and feminism and all of these things wouldn't have taken place. And so I would much rather give up my one right to vote if it meant 10,000 liberal women wouldn't be allowed to vote so that we could return our country to a better place. Because what we have to realize is women controlled the house, which means they controlled the vote of their husbands. And so that true dynamic was one vote for the entire household that was pretty much dictated by the wife, right? So the husband, who was tasked with taking care of and being responsible for his entire family, used the singular vote he had for his household to make sure that they were protected, to make sure that they were provided for. And what we did was we tricked thousands and thousands and thousands of people into thinking that that was oppression. And we're reaping what we sow. I mean, you can look at everything that's going on, not even just in America, but in the West today. And we could see the decline, the moral degradation, and the societal downfall that is taking place. And we can go, this is bad objectively.
Wow. So Braeden, are you saying women shouldn't have the right to vote?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Have you publicly declared that before?
Yeah, numerous times. My stance is a voting system based on Christian morals, which relates to married couples having one joint vote. And so it's not, oh, women shouldn't vote. It's that women should vote with their husbands and husbands with their wives. It is this idea that we should be working together, because what happened is when we pit the genders against each other, the battle of the sexes, we split everything apart. We took the children out of the home and put them in the government school systems. We put the wife against her husband and the husband against his wife. And that is what led to the downfall of America.
And so you're saying that one vote per household, but what about single women and single men? Do they get their own vote?
Nuns and priests and celibate, religious folk have a little bit of a different designation. But when it comes to Americans, we want people to be invested in the future of the country. And so the only way we're going to do that is if they have a stake in it. And so even better would be married and owns land, or at least rents a piece of property. Because if you are participating in society, you are more likely to vote selflessly than selfishly. Because if you're just here living off of the government, then you are going to vote as selfishly as possible. How much more can I get? Not what can I give? And so if we create a system that allows for people to give with altruism, then what we have is a society of people who will simply care about more than just themselves, which is the tenet of Christianity. The difference being it is not mandated by the government, but rather by our own free will. And so you don't have to get married. You don't have to do any of these things. But the idea is, as a Christian, if you want to fight for the betterment of society as a whole, then you will participate and engage. And the more participation that you take, the more that you engage, the more invested you become, and you carry more weight, essentially.
Have you seen any, I'm curious about this, whether there's any data or studies out there, like are there any cultures or civilizations that are Republican in form where the right to vote is restricted to men? And what are the characteristics of those societies? Do you have any empirical evidence for this?
Well, yeah, you can look at some of the strongest civilizations throughout the history of the world, and you can look at where they essentially drew their power from, and you can also see where their downfall began. So take ancient Rome, for example. They became Christian, the emperor died, the entire country, continent, or whatever was split into separate different parts with different pieces of Rome going to different generals. Moral degradation took place, sexual degeneracy became rampant, society fell, Rome collapsed. The same took place in Greece. The same took place in, you could look at pre-World War II Germany. They were moral degradation. They had this, that's why Hitler rose to power so quickly, was because of the Weimar Republic. You have this society where Berlin was known as the sin capital of Europe, where people were desiring something, anything. And that is why he rose to fame so quickly. That's why he had a 99% approval rating. And so when you look at these societies that rose to power very, very quickly, and then you look at what caused them to fall, right? The Weimar Republic, Berlin fell once after World War I, and then it fell again during World War II. But that first fall in World War I took place because of moral degradation. Rome collapsed, not because, a couple generals, squabbled and bickered and fought with each other. That took place, but also there was no moral cohesion in society. Nobody cared about anything other than themselves. And so every time a society becomes more and more inclined towards selfishness is when they decline morally. And when they decline morally, society fails. That's why America is currently at the stage that every other great nation, like Rome, like Greece, like, any other great, even the United Kingdom, reached and then fell. Every other country that has gotten to this point of moral degradation and sexual degeneracy and deviancy has never recovered from it. Now, my hope is that America is different. We truly are. We're the first country to do a whole lot of things. And if we can turn it around, we will be the first country to ever turn it around. But we have to be willing to take that fight, which is why I wrote the book. And it's not a matter of one person being better than the other. Like I said at the beginning of this interview, men and women are created with the same inherent value, that same dignity, and with a different purpose, right? It's a divine order instituted in the universe. Jesus Christ isn't less than God. He's not worse than God because he died on the cross. He's the same as God. God is 3 in 1, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But Jesus submitted to the will of the Father, right? He didn't submit because he was worse. He submitted because he understood that there was a divine order in the universe for the benefit of humankind.
And so what do you do with a woman who says, I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom, I want to work. I want to have a career. Is she, I'm sorry, I'm being provocative here, but is she, is she violating the will of God, even if she has no desire to have children and stay at home and get married?
No, God gives us free will to do whatever we see fit. He gives us that. That's a gift, right? That's why the gift of salvation also must be accepted by our free will. And so when you ask, well, what if someone says one thing or another, it's totally fine. What we have to realize is that when we're talking about the entire history of humankind, it wasn't ever oppressive. Women were never simply stay-at-home moms. I mean, there are studies that show that women during the time, even up until the late 19th century, were bringing in almost a third of the household income. But they weren't working traditional jobs in a corporate office, in a cubicle, submitting to a boss who didn't care about them, right? A boss who said, well, you come work for me, I'll freeze your embryos, and you could just have kids after the best years of your life life biologically for fertility, for having children, are over. They didn't give those fake promises in order to suck the years out of your life when you should be going out and having a family. And this goes for men and for women, right? This idea of let me wait till I'm 40 to get married is one of the silliest things I've ever heard. There's a study by Morgan Stanley using empirical data from the US Bureau of Census that says 30%, no, 45% of women by 2030 will be single. Right. And then to the men's side, 45% of men aged 18 to 25 have never approached a woman in their life before. And so we're literally witnessing this disconnect where people have just stopped engaging with each other. And
Yeah,
we
what's that
can't
all
look at
about?
that and say it's healthy.
Why
It's
is that
because we
happening?
pitted us.
You think so? Or pitted against each other? Men are
Well,
now
certainly.
scared of women, and women despise men.
Yes, the feminist movement told women that they were less than men and to hate men for it. And so
Yeah,
then
this
women
is true.
did. And then the feminist movement said women can be anything, which is great. I love the idea of pursuing whatever God has put in your life. That's not something that I would ever say that I'm against. The feminist movement then said that men can be women and that men can take women's jobs and men can dominate women's spaces and men can do all of these things because biologically we are wired differently. I can't draw, my sister can draw, right? I will beat her in a push-up competition every single time we try, right? That's not something that's ever going to come close because there are physical differences between both of us, XY and XX chromosomes. So this idea of this separation really is what drove us apart. It's why we're not talking anymore. I mean, you have there are videos of men online and there are videos of women online saying the most vile things about each other. And to somebody watching those clips, it's discouraging. I mean, why would a guy watch a video of a young woman online at the gym, filming herself in practically nothing, calling out the man who's in the same gym as her, who glances in her direction, a creep? Look at those comments and see that same man get destroyed. If someone finds out who he is, his life is ruined. He glanced in the wrong direction. That is discouraging. A man doesn't want to talk to a woman like that. And then women see other videos of women talking about men who have done these terrible things, and they don't want to engage with women either. And so people are just afraid to talk to each other. And part of it goes to the pornography issue. 10% of women in Gen Z, which is 1.2 million people, are on OnlyFans, which is a porn website where you can sell yourself for a price. 85% of men in America admitted to watching pornography at least once a month. Why would I talk to a girl? Why would I risk being rejected by a girl when the girl on my phone, I can pay to like me? I can pay for the girl here to never say, oh, well, you do this and you do that, and why don't you do the dishes and take the trash out? Why would I talk to someone who might nag me or make me a better person when I can just pay for fake human interaction, pay to be appreciated? The problem is we don't appreciate each other anymore because we've been taught to hate each other. That's my entire point. That's what I'm trying to bring to light with my book. That's what I bring with my social media. Is I tell people, look, it's not a matter of I'm better than you and you're better than me. It's a matter of we are the same in the eyes of God. We have a different purpose in life. But the fact of the matter is we are both created in the image of the Creator. And we need to understand that, because when we stop understanding that, we lose everything.
Well, Braeden, let's talk about social media for just a second. I think social media is one of the most powerful forces in modern culture that, it's only really been around for 25 years maybe in any real way. But look at what it's done. Do you think social media is one of the things that has made it so difficult for people to have real, meaningful, one-on-one relationships anymore? We're all behind our phones and so on. And the other thing I would point out, just want your comment on this, is the way social media seems to be designed is that they feed people the content that their algorithm computes that they want to have. And it causes, I believe, increased polarization as we don't understand people that don't think and act like us, and so they become the enemy and we get into these silos. What do you think?
Without a doubt, social media, as ironically as someone who does this for a living, social media is one of the worst things in the world. I can't stand it. They say ignorance is bliss, and I like to tell them I'm miserable if that's the case. The fact of the matter is, social media is a never-ending cycle of highlight reels. It is this perpetual, the next best thing is right around the corner. Dating apps I'm including in that statement. you have this idea of true love is one swipe away. And the foundation of this was laid with the rom-coms in Hollywood. I mean, there's plenty of studies by psychological magazines and institutions that have correlated people who watch romantic sitcoms such as How I Met Your Mother, or whatever, and those people have a negative outlook on life because their experiences with other humans did not match up what they saw on the screen. And so social media perpetuates that even further. And so rom-coms gave us a false sense of what life should be like, as all movies do, but for some reason rom-coms in particular have some sort of neurological effect on the brain. Social media just gets right into our core and can alter us. And there are people who are using their phones 15 hours a day. They don't put them down. And so what we have to understand is when you are in a relationship with someone, you see them day in and day out, you're going to see the good and the bad. But if you're looking at someone's highlight reel online and you're comparing that to your life, you're going to be miserable. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand that. And even if they do, they fail to apply it.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point. The thing too is we have such high rates of depression and suicide amongst young people today. Do you think social media is part of that? Not necessarily the cause, but certainly a big factor in it.
Social media plays a huge role in depression among young people. I mean, there's studies that say over 75% of young women, and this is, I say young, but let's generalize, 18 to 60-year-old, 75% of women, sometimes even a higher percentage, are on at least one form of antidepressant. 48% of men in that same age range as well. And so we have a society that is over medicated, and that is a problem.
So the other thing I see about social media, just to make sure we've beaten it to death here, but is that is our attention span shrinking? I mean, everything is in just little minute stuff. Do we go in depth to really understand stuff anymore, or is it just whoever has the better clickbait and the better soundbite?
That's certainly the case. Clickbait and being able to say things as quickly and efficiently as possible is really the key to social media because attention spans they're just gone. And so unfortunately, that is just a side effect of the what I call the Mr. Beastification. He's a YouTuber who created this style of switching every, half second to something new. And so the Mr. Beastification of the internet really perpetuated this idea of unless you are using flashy bright colors and quick time changes and loud animation, that kind of thing, what you're going to end up with is not any views. And so people are inclined and especially incentivized by social media platforms to make what people call brain rot, the fastest, just garbage content that you could consume. And it's only going to get worse.
Let's see if we can tie this back into sort of what you were talking about earlier with respect to young people returning to Christ and to even as you said, high church. I've got a chart I want to show if it's available. And this is showing church attendance from 2019 to 2022. And you can see on this that the interesting thing. There's two big points here, but one is how church attendance was already on the way up before COVID hit, and then COVID hits. Of course, the whole world is locked down, and you naturally have a significant drop. But then the swing back is phenomenal, especially now. Unfortunately, Gen Z is not on the chart, so forgive me for that, Braeden. But millennials are on here. And look at that, they're at almost 40% as of 2022, down from a low of 17%. And then you've got Gen X behind, and the boomers are trailing. They're the old churchgoers, right? Aren't they the ones that are supposed to be coming back? And they're the ones that are trailing behind. But I personally love this graph because it's just super good news to me. And I think that there's hope for America and the world from this. But let me ask you this question first with respect to social media. Are young people returning to church for community and fellowship as much as for finding truth?
They definitely are. You can certainly have a solid community within a church. That's what church helps us to accomplish, right? This idea of where two or more are gathered in my name, I am there as well. And so this fellowship that you can foster within a church is certainly a reason people are returning. I mean, like we talked about, there's a disconnect. People are single, they're lonely, they're desperate, and so they're trying to find love And ironically, a lot of them are going to church, maybe to go to youth group or young adults to meet someone, but they end up finding God at the same time. And so they find true love. They find that unfailing, never ending love. And so to me, I look at it from the stance of however you find God is great news, so long as you find the truth.
Well, one of the things that's interesting too is how much wokeism has invaded the church, and how our pastors today, many of them are not preaching the whole counsel of God. They're buying into woke ideology and things like that. So I'm like, well, if young people return to church, but they're going to a church like that, well, what's going to happen? Do you think they're going to churches like that, or are they finding Bible preaching ministries and Bible believing churches?
Oh, they certainly are. There is a large population going to these churches that preach wokeism, that don't actually preach. It's what we're warned about in, I believe, Second Titus, or Titus. It's just Titus, where Paul says there will come a time when people do not listen to sound doctrine, but lift up teachers who say what they want to hear. And that is certainly what's happening. I mean, I could just think of, I created a post about Life Church in, I think it's Oklahoma is their headquarters, do this sermon series of being at the movies, and they literally created the God from Moana and put it in the sanctuary of their church. What happened to no other foreign gods? I'm just like, that's such an obvious no-brainer to me, looking at it from an outside perspective, going, how did you run this? Because they have 40, campuses across the country. How did you run this through all of the ladder rings, all of the higher ups, and get this approved when there are so many other things you could be doing to promote the gospel? So it's things like that irk me, that make me, that are certainly discouraging, and I would love for young people to realize that. And I think a lot of them are. I mean, you mentioned Gen Z wasn't on the graph. There's a good portion of Gen Z, specifically, like I said, the young guys who are looking at things like that and going, okay, this is weird. There was that video of the Methodist pastor, I put it in quotes because he came dressed in drag and said that he's a drag queen pastor at his church in like Austin, Texas or something. A lot of young guys are looking at that going, that doesn't really seem like church. That just seems like a group of people who are hearing what they want to hear. And the way that I look at it is, if church is not convicting you to change, you're not going to church.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Braeden, we got a minute and a half left. Tell me, do you have a website that people can go to, and what's the name of your show? Do you have a podcast too?
Yeah, so people can follow me at any and every social platform at Braeden Sorbo. I highly recommend you check out my X or Twitter. That is where I'm the most active. And if they want to go get the book, they can go to braedensorbo.com. I have my shop link there, and everything it's super easy.
All right. Well, Braeden, I really appreciate you being on the show today, and wish you all the best. It's exciting to look at a young guy like you and hear you, speaking and aware of so much truth. Honestly, you remind me of my middle son. You're so much like him. It's hilarious. But anyway, that's another matter. You even speak alike. But way to go on the books. Folks, pick up a copy of BS Politics, and tell me the masculinity title again. I can't read it on the screen, but...
Embrace masculinity, lifting men up in a world that pushes them down.
Yeah, absolutely a message that we need to hear today. So anyway, brother, thanks for coming on Truth and Liberty. We really appreciate having you on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And everybody, thanks so much for watching Truth and Liberty today. I wanted to remind you to register for the Truth and Liberty Conference, September 11th through the 13th at Charis Bible College here in Colorado. It's going to be an amazing time. Charlie Kirk is going to be speaking on Thursday night. You will not want to miss that. Pastor Lorenzo Sewell will be ministering. He led the prayer at Donald Trump's inauguration. We're going to have a panel of Colorado governor candidates, and I'll be ministering. Andrew, another powerful lady named Laura Perry Smaltz, workshops, exhibitors. Don't miss it, guys. Go to truthandliberty.net today and register. Thanks for watching.